The media is trying to spin it saying, well, we don't know if those emails are real. And I predict the establishment's now going to insert fake emails in the coming days to try to disease the entire honeypot so that the media can then come out and try to discredit it. Kind of like it's admitted that Bush didn't go to a lot of his Air National Guard duties, but then some fake documents were put out by Karl Rove that CBS picked up, then discrediting the whole thing. So look for that trick. We know how they operate. Obviously, this is scientific fraud. They've already been proven that their data was wrong. Now we know it was on purpose. But another big issue when you read these emails is, how do we get this guy fired? How do we have different scientific groups blackball this person? How do we remove their funding? How do we get this journal suspended? How do we stop these people from being able to submit to scientific journals? So this is a giant collusion, almost like the Catholic Church trying to stop Galileo from, when he noticed that the moons of Jupiter were orbiting, he did mathematic calculations and could tell that the Earth was actually orbiting the sun. So we have that going on. So incredible intimidation. They need to be raided. Their hard drives need to be grabbed. Their filing cabinets, their communiques, because they're pushing for a global government, global tax through all of this. An international system to control our lives. We're going to play that Von Rompuy clip here.
2009 is also the first year of global governance, with the establishment of the G20 in the middle of the financial crisis. The climate conference in Copenhagen is another step towards the global management of our planet. Our mission, our presidency, is one of hope, supported by acts and by deeds.
You look at the new head of the European Union. He is on record saying first year of global governance through the Copenhagen Treaty and the carbon tax. He's also quoted as calling for global management of the planet through the environmental crises. That's why the big banks, JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, the Bank of England, all the money people are funding the climate change system, because then they get to have a global government that manages and taxes the life-giving gas, carbon dioxide, that plants breathe. So we need a real investigation. And we know why there's all this fraud. We know what their goals are. Listing what plants breathe, what all human activity produces as a toxic waste that they can regulate. It gives them total control over every facet of our lives. And they're in the news saying that they're going to decide what technologies can be developed, what technologies are going to be banned. London Guardian, global body needs to direct green technologies. G77 says, developed nations call for UN body to police battle on climate change. So that's going on. We're going to be covering this more in subsequent videos, but the emails, the documents, boil downs of all the other previous fraud, the intimidation of scientists, it's all on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. If we force this out into the public, which is already starting to happen, and expose the spin and show people what's really happening, we can blow this thing sky high in the info war. This is the equivalent of Bothans stealing the Death Star plans. Now we have to use these plans. I hope you understand the level of this. They admit the emails are real. This is meant to set up a world government in their own words. This is all being decided on right now. This is a godsend. This is one of the greatest blows against the New World Order I've ever seen. Last week, it passed out of committee in the House. They have 311 votes. It's sure to pass a strong audit the Fed bill. The Senate tried to strip it. Some House members tried to strip it. They failed there. We're having victory after victory after victory. And my film, Fall the Republic, details how the banks are setting up this climate dictatorship, this dictatorship over resources. So please watch that film. We're going to put a link to it up in the corner here on YouTube to watch it in full for free. Give it to everyone you know. This film cost me $200,000 to make. But to all of you out there, this is not pearls before swine. This will annihilate the New World Order and their agenda. This has caught them red-handed, and they need to be brought to justice, ladies and gentlemen.
So that's how Alex presented it to you. Now, once again, are we going to put up with this? This was a mechanism used by these globalists. Once again, this was done by the UN, and they did this IPCC, Intergovernmental, right? That's the I, intergovernmental. So they want, all the governments we're going to control, okay? Thing on climate change. Why it's important, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Why it's important is we got to go back to follow the money. What I always say on the show, follow the money. Well, who donated the land for the UN? Could that have been Rockefeller, the big globalist bankster? Let's see, Standard Oil and all that stuff. Let's see. Who gave the first check for the building of the United Nations? Could that have been Rockefeller? Okay. Paid for by banksters. Okay, for the benefit of who? Could it be banksters? Boy, you know, if it wasn't such a coincidence, people would call it a conspiracy, wouldn't they? So it's interesting. Anyway, I was going over, this is the UK piece, okay? Anyway, once again, okay. A leaked email in which Jones writes that he had used a trick. What is it when a scientist uses a trick? And they're telling you, in Massachusetts, okay, that you have to have biofuel because this guy used a trick? Okay, they're telling you because the guy in the Penn State who made the hockey stick chart of, gee, global warming, yet it turns out in their computer programs they got rid of the Middle Ages warm period, they got rid of the cooling trend, they hid the decline. This is what they said, trick, to hide the decline in a chart detailing recent global temperatures. These crooks, these banksters, they're eugenicists. This is what you're facing. So anyway, you should wake up to this. This is a wake-up thing. What's happened is a quality environmental movement of the 70s got co-opted by the bankers, by the banksters, by these elitists who happen to be eugenicists. Here's a little piece just to show you that, imagine what if the environmental movement got co-opted?
You the environmentalists, you the activists, you the campaigners, you who have watched with a growing sense of unease the ways in which this world has been ravaged in the pursuit of the almighty dollar. You who have watched with growing concern the ways that we treat the planet that we are leaving behind for our children, for our grandchildren, and for those generations not yet born. This is a message not of divisiveness, but one of cooperation and unity. This is a message of hope and empowerment, but it requires us to take a look at a hard and uncomfortable truth. Your movement has been usurped by the very same financial interests you thought you were fighting against. You have suspected as much for years. You watched with hope and excitement as your cause, your movement, your message began to spread, as it was taken up by the media and given attention, as conferences were organized, and as the ideas you had struggled so long and hard to be heard were talked about nationally, then internationally. You watched with growing unease as the message was simplified. First it became a slogan, then it became a brand. Soon it was nothing more than a label, and it became attached to products. The ideas you had once fought for were now being sold back to you for profit. You watched with growing unease as the message became parroted, not argued, more like a fashion rather than something that came from the conviction of understanding. You disagreed when the slogans and then the science was dumbed down, when carbon dioxide became the focus and CO2 was taken up as a political cause. Soon it was the only cause. You knew that Al Gore was not a scientist, that his evidence was factually incorrect, that the movement was being taken over by a cause that was not your own, one that relied on beliefs you did not share to propose a solution you did not want. It began to reach a breaking point when you saw that the solution being proposed was not a solution at all, when they began to propose new taxes and new markets that would only serve to line their own pockets. You knew something was wrong when you saw them argue for a cap-and-trade scheme proposed by Ken Lay, when you saw Goldman Sachs position itself to ride the carbon trading bubble, when the whole thrust of the movement became ways to make money, or spend money, or raise money from this panic. Your movement had been hijacked. And when you looked at the Club of Rome's elite member roster, and when you learned about eugenics and the Rockefeller ties to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, and the practice of crypto-eugenics and the rise of the overpopulation fear-mongering and the call by elitist after elitist after elitist to cull the world population,